The darkness of the vast forest was hauntingly thick, and the heartbeat of the lost boy echoed through the stillness. Every step he took rustled against the dry leaves, and the distant howls of hungry beasts could be heard. Suddenly, he saw a flickering light through the massive trees and ran toward it with desperate hope. There stood a solitary wooden cabin where an old man sat by a bonfire in the front yard. The old man's face was wrinkled, but he looked kind enough to make the boy feel a bit relieved. The old man invited the boy inside, offering him a warm bowl of soup and a place to stay, treating him with great hospitality. However, as midnight approached, the old man's expression suddenly turned solemn as he gave a firm command. "My child, if you are to stay in this house, there is one rule you must strictly follow," the old man said seriously. He pulled out a black cloth, handed it to the boy, and added a final warning to his instructions. "From midnight until dawn, you must tie this cloth over your eyes. No matter what you hear, absolutely do not look." The boy could not understand the old man's words, but he nodded fearfully because of the strange look in his eyes. Strong winds began to blow outside, and the sound of tree branches scratching against the roof emerged. As the grandfather clock chimed midnight, the old man immediately extinguished the lantern. The boy took the cloth with trembling hands and tied it tightly over his eyes. The entire surroundings fell into darkness, and all his senses shifted towards listening. Initially, everything was silent, but after a while he heard the sound of someone walking on the upper floor. The footsteps were incredibly heavy, and the wooden floorboards creaked loudly as they gradually drew closer to his room. The boy pulled the blanket tightly over himself, but he could not stop his whole body from shivering. The noisy sounds of furniture being forcibly dragged from one place to another echoed throughout the house. He remembered the old man's warning and kept his eyes shut tight, but he felt as if something was staring at him in the dark. The air in the room suddenly turned ice cold, and a rotting stench wafted into the boy's nose. He felt someone standing right next to his bed, causing his breathing to become shallow and ragged. "My son, Father is here. Please open your eyes and look at me," a voice whispered right into his ear. The voice sounded exactly like his father's, whom he missed so dearly, leaving the boy utterly astonished. "I have been searching for you for a long time. Let's go home together now," the voice continued to coax the boy. The instinct hit the boy to remove the blindfold, but the old man's warning echoed loudly in his head. He could not distinguish whether this was truly his father or if something was deceiving him. "Open your eyes, my son. You know how much I love you, don't you?" the voice whispered even closer. The boy felt cold fingers brush against his cheek, causing a sudden chill to run down his spine. His heart fought a fierce battle between fear and doubt, and tears began to stream down his face. The boy's mental struggle reached its peak, and cold sweat began to pour from his entire body. "My son, don't you trust your father?" the voice emerged again, sounding more painfully sad than before. Hearing a faint sob behind that voice, the boy felt heartbroken and completely forgot the old man's warning. He could not endure the fear and longing any longer. He ripped the black cloth off his eyes. "Father!" he cried out, but the sight he saw left him paralyzed with absolute terror. There was no one inside the house, only the pale moonlight falling across the floorboards. The old man was gone, and the image of his father who had been calling him had completely vanished. However, when his gaze landed on a large mirror in the corner, his breath hitched and stopped. In the mirror, a very tall and massive, eyeless dark shadow was standing directly behind him. The creature's fingers were long, and it was slowly reaching out its hand to gouge out the boy's eyes. The boy was struck with terror, forgetting even to breathe, as he stood like a stone statue watching the reflection in the mirror. The creature's face had two hollow voids where eyes should be, looking utterly ghastly and terrifying. As its icy fingers drew closer to the boy's eyes, he felt the looming shadow of death. "I told you not to look," the old man's voice suddenly rang out, echoing through the air. The boy snapped back to his senses and, in a blind panic, shut his eyes tight and frantically tied the cloth back on. In the darkness, something hissed loudly into the boy's ear with a sharp intake of breath. "Now he has seen you, and he will never let you go," the old man whispered softly. The boy curled up in the dark, feeling the creature's cold breath right against the back of his neck. The sounds of objects shattering and horrific screams erupted loudly all around him. He resolved absolutely never to open his eyes again, doing nothing but praying for the dawn to arrive. Time seemed to stretch on, as if the world were ending, and the boy remained submerged in the depths of darkness. In his ears, he could constantly hear the grinding of the creature's teeth and its heavy, wheezing breaths. Outside the house, the fierce winds battered the building so hard it felt as though it might collapse. "My eyes! Give me back my eyes!" A raspy voice echoed throughout the entire room. The boy covered his ears with trembling hands, but the sound pierced straight through into his very brain. Suddenly, he heard the old man's voice again, chanting in a strange and mysterious language. With those chants, he felt the terrifying energy inside the house gradually begin to dissipate. However, the boy remained vigilant and kept his eyes tightly shut, just as the old man had instructed. His body was cold and stiff, and he felt as though he might lose consciousness from sheer exhaustion. Finally, with the faint sound of a rooster crowing in the distance, the vast darkness began to slowly fade away. The boy felt the first rays of the morning sun piercing through the cracks of the house. The entire surroundings fell deathly silent, and all the haunting sounds heard during the night had vanished. With trembling hands, the boy slowly removed the black cloth from his eyes. When he opened his eyes, he found himself not in a beautiful wooden cabin, but in a decayed and ruined old house. The roof was full of holes, and the floor was covered only with thick dust and withered leaves. The soup bowl he had eaten the previous night turned out to be nothing more than a large rusted old mug. He searched for the old man, but there was no one left in the house, leaving him all alone. As he prepared to run out of the house in terror, he noticed a small piece of old paper lying on the floor. On that paper was a message written in crimson letters that looked as if they were made of blub. "I saved your life by trading it for my eyes," he read, and his heart skipped a beat in shock. After reading those words, the boy's entire body trembled as he recalled the old man's words. He rushed toward a dusty old mirror standing in a corner of the ruined house. When he reached the mirror and saw his reflection, the boy's breath hitched at his throat. His eyes were no longer the simple brown orbs they had been before. Now their eyes had become a bright and deep blue, just like the old man's eyes. As he stared into the mirror, he felt as though he were looking at a complete stranger. There was a mysterious light within those eyes, allowing him to see everything around him with unnatural clarity. He wondered who the old man really was and why he had sacrificed himself to save him. He realized that the eyeless shadow behind him had also completely vanished. However, those blue eyes would now remain as a gift that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The boy walked out of the ruined house with unsteady steps and made his way along the forest path. The trees, birds, and clouds around him appeared brighter and in extraordinary colors than ever before. It felt as though the blue eyes given by the old man had the power to see things hidden from ordinary human sight. Along the way, he saw strange spiritual silhouettes, but they fearfully moved aside to make way for him. He instinctively knew the way back to his village and reached the edge of the forest as he walked onward. The villagers ran toward the boy with joy when they saw him, but they froze upon seeing his eyes. "Your eyes, what happened to them?" an elder asked with a trembling voice. The boy said nothing and turned to look back at the great forest one last time. There he alone saw the old man's spirit smiling and waving a final goodbye to him. He returned home, repeatedly thanking the kind old man who had saved his life in his heart. Even after the boy returned to his home, he could not forget the events that had unfolded that night. His family members welcomed him warmly, yet they were slightly unsettled by his strange eyes. Every time he looked at himself in the mirror, he could see traces of the old man in his blue eyes. Because of these eyes, he was seeing the world anew and becoming aware of the truths hidden in the darkness. Sometimes, at the stroke of midnight, he could still hear the old man's soft whispers of warning in his ears. The phrase, "It is better not to see everything," remained permanently etched in his mind. Although he had succeeded in the old man's blindfold game, his life had been changed forever. In the quiet nights of the village, he came to understand the value of darkness while keeping his eyes closed. Though his eyes shone brightly, he decided to look at the truth only when it was necessary. Thus, with the old man's eyes, the boy continued to live his new life with a sense of calm and stability.